All right, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending when you're joining us from. We're very excited to welcome Suzanne Friday with us. She has been a wonderful asset to the council for many years and the sector. Suzanne is the foundation governance. Sorry.
Yeah, I think if you just say she's responsible for foundation governance.
Yes. Okay. We'll cut that out. It's okay. So Suzanne Friday is responsible for all of the foundation governance at USA Foundations. And we're very excited to speak with her today to teach you a little bit more about the legal function of a foundation and an organization. So welcome, Suzanne. Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, thank you, Manuela.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to get into it. So, Suzanne, we would love to know, with all your experience around really as a new leader or an executive leader or CEO entering their organization, what is good for them to know about this area of an organization if they had no idea about it or maybe had some sort of idea about it?
Sure. So it's really important to understand that a nonprofit organization, including foundations, are based in a set of laws primarily found in the Internal Revenue Code and the Treasury regulations. So there are laws and regulations governing the operations of foundations and nonprofit organizations. And as a CEO or a leader of one of these organizations, you don't need to know word for word what all the laws are, but you have to understand that there are laws governing your operations. And if any of those laws or regulations are violated, there can be penalties. And penalties range from uh, penalty taxes and fines to, in the most egregious situations, a revocation of your tax exempt charitable status. And that's pretty severe. So as a leader, you need to be aware of that and then know where to get help, whether you have an in-house attorney or you have a law firm that you work with. It's important to develop a good relationship with them. Those legal professionals should be your allies. They should be your consultants. They should be there to back you up and explain things to you and help guide you in ways that you're not going to violate any of the laws or regulations. In addition to things like penalties and fines that you could incur, violations of the legal rules have pretty significant PR consequences for foundations and organizations. A savvy reporter that gets wind of a violation of regulation by an organization can write a story, and that can really hurt your operations. And if you're fundraising operation, if your success depends on fundraising, it can be really devastating to have some bad press for violating the rules and the laws. Most violations, I would say, are probably not intentional. They're unintentional. But that's why you want to have a good relationship with a legal counsel. Again, it could be in-house, it could be a law firm or someone that you work with. And so you can ask those questions when something doesn't feel right and you're concerned, and maybe a donor is asking you to do something that just doesn't feel right. You've got somebody to turn to. The Council on Foundations, if you're a member of the council, they have a legal department and legal professionals that have always been there for the members to answer questions like that. So that's another resource you can consider. But it is important to know that you can't just run off and kind of do your own thing. There are guide rails, there are laws and regulations that govern your operations that you need to be aware of. One other thing I would say that's really helpful is, like today, getting training. Lots of legal professionals provide training through conferences, webinars, things like that. So as the leader of the foundation, that would be something I would definitely recommend looking into, so that again, you have knowledge. You don't have to be an expert. You just need to know where to go, and you need to be able to spot those issues when something just doesn't feel quite right.
That's wonderful, Suzanne. Thank you so much for kicking us off with that. I think that leads in perfectly to my next question. So, what if they're in a tough situation and something's happening? When is the right time to ask legal for help? When should they be bringing you into the conversation and the situation?
Sure. Lawyers are always going to say, the earlier the better. Absolutely. You really don't want to be calling an attorney after, something's happened, whether it's an issue with an employee that you have, or again, a donor who's asking for something that you don't think is quite right. Um, Before things get too far down the road, that's when you want to bring in your legal counsel. Um, and again, this is where developing a relationship before you would need legal is really important. So let's say you attended training and you really like the lawyer who's presenting that. Maybe you can reach out and develop a relationship, talk to them well before anything bad might happen at your organization, so that somebody that you feel good about contacting when the time comes. But lawyers are always going to say, the sooner the better. It's less expensive usually to head off a problem early on before it gets too bad. You don't want to get down the road where you're getting sued, by an employee for some employment-related issue. You want to head that off early on. And good attorneys are good counselors, and they're going to be able to talk you through the situations, give you suggestions and things before the need for litigation or defending your organization in court would arise.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And so I think that goes to my next question. So when is answered, but how? What's the best approach of connecting with a counselor, a lawyer in a situation? How should one approach in either in the crisis or to be preventative, to your point?
Yeah, yeah. So attorneys and this is actually a really good question, and I'll get on my soapbox a little bit. So there are lots and lots of wonderful attorneys out there, right? And if you're, a small foundation in a smaller metro area, you might not have attorneys who are specialized in nonprofit law. But nonprofits and the law that governs nonprofits is very tied to the tax code. So you really do need an attorney who knows that. It's great to have your real estate attorney or your estate attorney that may be on your board, or that and work with sometimes. But if it's a true nonprofit issue, you need somebody who knows that area of law. So networking with those attorneys that and I would guess that almost everybody out there has an attorney on their board or knows an attorney, works with professional advisor attorneys in relation to donors that they know, and then they can network to find an attorney with knowledge of the nonprofit law. Now, that's if the issue is a nonprofit issue. So, for instance, a donor that wants to make a gift that's particularly tricky. One of the other areas that you all as CEOs and leaders of organizations are going to encounter, and this is actually a big issue for legal, is employment law issues. Actually running your organization and the employees that work there. In that case, you're not necessarily going to be looking for a nonprofit lawyer. You're going to be looking for an employment law lawyer. And that is also a specialty in the law where you really need a good expert in employment law matters. So if you've got an employee making a claim for discrimination or harassment or something like that, it's really not going to be in your best interest to be turning to that real estate lawyer on your board. You're going to want someone who knows the area of law. And again, contacting them early, developing that relationship early, and trying to head off the problem or deal with the problem early on before it gets too down the road is going to be in your best interest. But kind of going to the heart of your question is, where do you look? Where do you start? The council is a good place. We know lots of attorneys in this field in just about every state that we can give you names. Training and conferences are great places. I'm always impressed with a really good legal speaker at a conference, and I always make note of their names. Um, so, if I ever need someone in employment law for a real estate transaction, those kind of things, that's not my area of law. I remember those people that I was really impressed with at conferences and speaking engagements and things. So that's a good place to go. Um, Unfortunately, a lot of the nonprofit lawyers are based in Washington, D.C., and if you're not around the D.C. area, it could get a little bit more tricky to find somebody, but there are good attorneys all over the country. So don't hesitate to, you're talking to that lawyer on your board who happens to be a corporate lawyer or a real estate lawyer or something, and say, look, I understand your specialty, but we really need someone in employment law. Can you help me find someone? I think that's important to know what you need and get the right person for the job.
That is so powerful and very, very true. Thank you so much. So I think another question I'm really curious about is, we have just shifted the entire scope of what being in an organization is. And so, with everything that's happened this past year and a half, 2 years, my gosh. And so, I would love to hear from you, Suzanne. How has this impacted, the virtual space, the pandemic, everything that's happened this past year? How has it shifted for you in the work that you do? But also, maybe as an organizational leader, how do you think that this person should approach working with legal in this way, if it has shifted at all, maybe?
Yeah, well, I definitely think it has. I mean, one of the most obvious ways is, so there's going to be more issues potentially that arise with your employees, and I'm talking about things like accommodating employees who want to continue to work at home, who may have, medical reasons or other reasons why they don't feel comfortable coming in an office. And if you're trying to bring your organization back into the office, you definitely have to be aware of and flexible with employees who have reasons why they may not um, be able to come in the office. And then that can lead to employment law issues where you may find yourself in need of talking to an employment law lawyer, if you get into an impasse with an employee or something like that. So that is definitely an area that's grown. I mean, there's always been an area of employment law that's important to understand, that will probably someday factor into your operations, whether it's disabilities or things like that. But I think it's really heightened right now with the pandemic and everything. I think people are really focusing on personal well-being, and I think more people are asking for accommodations and things, which employers with leaders of organizations didn't always have to deal with. So that's one area that's definitely grown, that I've seen over the last year or two. But another shift, I think, which I think is a really positive shift, is the fact that we're all now getting comfortable with uh, Zoom calls and working through over, online over video, or looking at webinars where we used to go to things in person. I just personally feel that is making the legal field more accessible, because I don't know about you, but if it to me, it's easier, it's more convenient to watch, a webinar with a legal expert talking about some subject than to go to a conference or something. But it's also maybe a little less intimidating and therefore more accessible, right? You'll sit down and watch a webinar that a lawyer is presenting, versus going to their office and wanting to ask them questions, right? Um, but also, one-on-one appointments over video can be a little bit more comfortable, less intimidating. Hopefully, I'm like not very intimidating here, but I like that. I like this shift that we're moving. The legal profession has, and I've been in the legal profession for a really long time, for well over 20 years. When I started, it was very formal, right? Everybody was still wearing suits and in the office, and it was a very formal kind of profession. And because of that, it could be intimidating, and you might be hesitant to go seek out an attorney or talk to an attorney in that way, if you weren't, used to talking to attorneys. But nowadays, I think things are getting a little bit more casual, maybe. And I don't mean that in terms of not giving you good advice. Attorneys are always going to strive to give you the best advice they can. But it's just the accessibility and the ease and the comfort of doing it, um, with all of these new options. I like that shift. I like the way that's going. And I hope people are more open to reaching out to legal, to lawyers when they need them, making an online Zoom appointment or something, because it's a little bit more convenient and it doesn't interrupt your day and you don't have to go downtown to their office and all of those things. So I want everyone in this field to not be afraid of lawyers, to understand that they are there to help and serve you and advise you and be your counselors, and somebody that you can talk over issues even well before you get served legal papers or something like that, because they really are a valuable resource. And in the nonprofit world, there are traps to watch out for, and sometimes you do need a conversation with a lawyer to really understand, what the downside could be when something happens.
Wow, thank you so much. I think this is exactly what folks need to hear, especially at this place. I'm very excited. I mean, we have, let's see, looking at the time. So we're at 16 minutes. So I think it's up to you. You said in the past you've gone through slides around maybe topics that have been common, common issues that may happen with folks. Maybe we could spend like a couple minutes just talking about different common legal topics that have come up for folks, so they can also get a sense of that. How do you feel about that? Does
Yeah,
that feel
sure. I mean,
possible?
do you have specific questions, or do you want me to just talk about a couple things that I know come up over and over again?
Yeah, maybe we could do that. Just like common legal issues that you see come up that folks and new leaders or rising leaders are surprised by. And what we can cut this in, and then we can close off after that. How does that
Okay,
sound? Yeah.
sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, great. Great, Suzanne. Well, thank you so much. I'm really curious about a lot of these legal issues that you're talking about. So, what are some of these common legal issues that you see on a recurrence with CEOs, new CEOs, or even new executives that are coming into organizations?
Sure. So, in nonprofit organizations and foundations, I think there's probably three big areas of legal issues that arise. One we've already touched upon a little bit is the employment law, right? You're running a business, you have employees, you're the boss, and there are all kinds of things that can arise with your employees. And this is where it's really helpful to get some good training, and there's lots of training options out there, whether it's accommodating disabilities or preventing harassment and those kind of things. As a leader, you want to make sure you get the training not only for yourself but for your staff, and so you hopefully don't have to deal with any of those issues. Wrongful terminations and those kind of things are probably the primary area that a nonprofit organization would get sued for. So employment law issues are one big bucket of legal issues. Another big bucket, though, is your work with your donors. And this is where the nonprofit law and the tax law comes into play, because your donors may want to, do things that are not um, perfectly compliant with the tax law, whether it's making a gift or asking you to make a grant to an organization that is inappropriate, And we know how important, trust me, I know over the 20-something years I've been doing this, how important donor relations are and how it's important to make your donors happy and make sure that they love your organization. But there will be times in your career where you will have to tell a donor no. And sometimes it's helpful to have that legal backup, right? To explain to the donor, well, we'd love to do this and we understand what you're trying to do, but our lawyers are saying that that's inappropriate and we just can't. And then and this goes back to, your questions about finding legal help. It's always wonderful to find that lawyer who's not only going to say, no, that you can't do that, but help you think of a different way to do whatever you're trying to do that will make your donor happy, that's illegal, right? So I used to pride myself on trying to, this creative thinking, right? How can we achieve what you want to achieve in a legal way? Your idea may not work, but we can try and think of something else. So, a creative partner in an attorney is really valuable. But donor issues, donors who are wanting to make gifts or wanting you to make grants on their behalf that are not appropriate, that inappropriately benefit themselves and their family, you have to be really careful about that because that's the reputation of your organization at stake, not to mention the potential penalties and things you can get from the IRS. So those donor issues are another issue. And then finally, I would say it's not quite as common as the others, but there can be issues with your board members. Okay, you're the CEO, you're the leader of the organization, but you obviously serve at the pleasure of your board, and you need to develop good relationships and good working relationships with your board. And sometimes you'll have issues. Some of the most contentious legal cases that I've been involved with have been between organizational leaders, employees, and the boards, and they've been at odds. The board doesn't like what the CEO is doing, or vice versa, and it can actually get to a point where you're involved in a legal case. So developing good board relations, and I'm sure you guys are probably providing all kinds of training on developing good board relations so that you hopefully never have that happen. But that's another area where I see sometimes true legal cases arise for nonprofits and for foundations.
Wow, Suzanne, I'm learning so much. So thank you so much. This is incredible. No, I loved all of the topics that you mentioned, and I think thank you for sharing in depth, some of these common issues that come up because you need to know about them as leaders. I also want to resonate with a lot of the things that you brought up continuously throughout our conversation. The value of getting trained and getting trained early on as leaders, really being able to take time for yourselves, just like you're doing in the personal and professional development for yourself, but also taking training for legal. I mean, I'm glad and thank you for mentioning our legal services at the council and our legal matters service, which is a really great opportunity for you. And you can ask us more about that. Identifying resources that are relatable and reasonable and also right fit, right? And so thinking not only about the trainings, but also really understanding what it is that you're looking for so you can find the right resources that are important to you, and the right lawyer, more importantly, that is right for you. And I love what you said, lawyers are your friends. So do not shy away from building relationship with friends and lawyers early on. And as early as now, while you're in this position, do not wait until you're an executive or you're a CEO to build these relationships. Start building these relationships now, getting these trainings now. And so when you're ready to make that big step, you're not feeling like this is going to be another hurdle that you have to take care of. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. This is incredible. Any other final notes that folks should know or think about?
No, but I love what you said. Lawyers are your friends. If you're ever at a conference and you have a particularly good, speaker who's a lawyer, go up to them when the session's done, introduce yourself and say hi, because you never know when, down the road you may ask, or you may want to call them with a question or something. Especially in the nonprofit world, the lawyers who work in this area are really awesome people. We're really nice people. We love to talk. will talk your ear off. So don't hesitate and make some friends in the legal community, and it'll serve you well.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for your
You're
time,
welcome.
for always your accessibility. And I agree, Suzanne is one of those incredible friend lawyers that you want in your life. So we'll share her contact in the LMS. Feel free to connect with her. And now we're going to give you space to all answer or ask your questions, ask your questions on the Jamboard, and we'll provide that link at the bottom. So thank you, everyone.